It is now time for the Robesonian Sports Report with Chris Stiles on 97.1 FM, 1340 AM, WAGR in Lumberton, covering sports for Robeson County. Now here's your host, Chris Stiles.
And a good Thursday morning to you here on WAGR. This is the Robesonian Sports Report, and I am your host, Chris Stiles, sports editor at the Robesonian. And we're going to start the show here going over the week that was in football locally. Later on, we'll look at the week ahead, and then in the middle, we'll have a special guest as well. So jumping right in with last week's football results, Red Springs beat Fairmont 33-20. St. Paul's beat West Bladen 41-0. Southview beat Lumberton 30-0, and Jack Britt beat Purnell Sweat 41-0. Collegiately, UNC Pembroke beat Wheeling 35-32. And so starting with that in-county high school game, Red Springs and Fairmont, this was the Southeastern Athletic Conference opener for both teams, and it was both of them were seeking their first win of the season. Red Springs did earn that first victory with the 33-20 win, and so Fairmont, of course, remains winless on the season. It was kind of an even first half, somewhat even. Red Springs led 13-6 at the intermission before really a big play in this game was Jaquel Samac, Red Springs, very good running back, lined up out wide, went long for a pass, and it tipped off the hands of a defensive back and into Mac's right hand, and kind of caught it one-handed as he turned around and sped off to the end zone for, I think it was a 33-yard touchdown, somewhere in that neighborhood. And that made it 20-6 at the time. That was early in the third quarter. Fairmont did close to 20-12, but then Red Springs scored on a touchdown run by Jaquel Samac, as well as later on a touchdown catch by Jordan Norton to go up 33-12, and then Fairmont scored late to make it 33-20. Jaquel Samac had 107 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns on 20 carries. Red Springs also threw the ball a good bit. Chase Boone for 130 yards, 7 for 15 on the night. 3 of those passes went to T.J. Ellerby, who had 37 receiving yards. That's a good night statistically, but that's actually kind of a down night for him, as good as he is, but also had a rushing touchdown. For Fairmont, Jamarion Brown was 11 for 22 throwing the ball. That's kind of become Fairmont's more preferred method of trying to move the ball is through the pass here lately. It's just they've become better at that than at the running game. And Brown had 138 yards through the air. Jameer Jones had 5 catches for 38 yards and a couple of touchdowns. And was also named Fairmont's homecoming king at halftime of the football game. Fairmont's 20 points tied its largest offensive night of the season. It's also the first time they've scored 3 offensive touchdowns. The other time they had 20, there was a defensive score in there. And their 33 points was the least they've allowed this season. So, it's still a loss, but at the same time, a little bit of room showing improvement there, even as they still have plenty of room for improvement down the road. Fairmont's hosting Midway this week, while Red Springs hosts St. Paul's, and we'll talk about both those games a little later on. St. Paul's had a 41-0 win over West Bladen. This was also their conference opener, and it's their 9th straight win in a conference opener. St. Paul's led 14-0 after the first quarter, 35-0 at halftime, just kind of taking care of business here against a 1-win team on the season in West Bladen. Quintel McNeil had 3 rushing touchdowns. Theophilus Setzer ran for 1 as well. Demarion Wells blocked a punt for a touchdown, or returned a block punt, I should say, for a touchdown. Ja'Kai Purcell had a punt return for a touchdown. And this is also the second shutout in the last 3 games for St. Paul's defense. Pretty staunch unit on that side of the ball. And when St. Paul's has been good, it's been their defense has been kind of one of those stone wall type of defenses. It's very hard to score against, and that seems to be the case this year. They've had a couple games where they've had some lapses, but for the most part, they've been quite good on that side of the ball. And they will travel to Red Springs this week. Southview beat Lumberton 30-0 in United 8 conference play. This is the second straight game that Lumberton's been shut out. It was 12-0 after the first quarter. That remained the score at halftime, and then 18-0 at the end of the third quarter. And Lumberton's offense simply has struggled so far in conference play through its first 3 United 8 games, and it's resulted in 3 straight losses. And they've had a pattern of also falling behind multiple scores in the first quarter, which those things, of course, do correlate to each other. Easy to fall behind when you don't score, but and they've struggled to recover from those early deficits, even as there's been plenty of game left in those situations against Cape Fear, against Jack Britt, and Southview, but haven't been able to really rebound in those situations. And the Pirates host Grays Creek for homecoming this week, looking to more broadly rebound after 3 straight losses. Here on the Robesonian Sports Report on WAGR, I'm your host, Chris Stiles, sports editor at the Robesonian, going over last week's high school football results locally. Jack Britt beat Purnell Sweat 41-0. Sweat also has not scored in 2 weeks, like their counterparts at Lumberton. This game was 13-0 after a quarter, 34-0 at the half. And Sweat's offense was kind of inconsistent in non-conference play. Had a 40-point game against Fairmont, which really, as far as Fairmont allowing points, that's kind of been middle of the pack, even though that's a lot of points for Sweat. And then 21 against Red Springs. A couple of those were set up by turnovers and a short field. And then 19 against St. Paul's in the opener. And then got to conference play and have scored 1 touchdown in 3 games. Josh Deeks pointed out to me they have played very good teams, and that is true, but it seems like it's more than that, and at some point you've got to score the football. They'll have a chance to do so as they face Southview this week on the road. Collegiately, UNCP beat Wheeling 35-32. It's the first win for UNCP after 4 tough weeks to start the season. And they trailed this game 21-7 at halftime, so they were staring 0-5 right in the face, but outscored Wheeling 28-11 in the second half. Led this game actually 35-24. It was 28-3 in the second half at that point before Wheeling did score a late touchdown. Wheeling got the stop it needed to get the ball back, but on the punt by UNCP, Wheeling fumbled the return. UNCP was able to recover, and from there they ran out the clock. Colin Johnson's been battling some injuries and did not start this game for UNCP, but after relieving Trey Robinson, Johnson had 324 yards and 4 touchdowns for the Braves. Joe Hayes with a great game at receiver with 8 receptions for 183 yards and 3 touchdowns. While the score was close here, the yards for each side was not. UNCP had 547 and Wheeling had 289. That's UNCP's most yards on the season with that 547. And finally, after literally a month on the road, the Braves will return home this week to face West Liberty. That's a 1 p.m. kick on Saturday, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the final segment as we do each week. But also we're going to talk about it with UNCP coach Mark Hall coming up here in just a minute. You can find information on all of this at Robesonian.com and in the print edition of the Robesonian as well. Just getting started here on the Robesonian Sports Report. As I mentioned, Mark Hall will join us after the break. You're listening to the Robesonian Sports Report on WAGR. Back on the Robesonian Sports Report, and we're joined over the phone by UNCP head football coach Mark Hall. How's it going, Coach?
Doing well. Hope you guys are, and I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yep, and you guys finally getting to play a home game this week after a month on the road. Had 4 away games plus a bye. Haven't played at home since August 31st. So, how exciting is that for the team to just finally get to be back at home at Grace P. Johnson Stadium this week?
I think the kids are fired up to be here. I don't think anybody was excited about getting back on a bus and driving to West Virginia. The Wingate game has been so long ago, it doesn't even feel like it's been a part of our season. So I think everybody's excited to be here, be in front of their family and friends, and, be at Grace P. Johnson Stadium on Saturday afternoon.
And you guys coming off your first win of the season at Wheeling last Saturday, and how much does that kind of, it's a momentum sport. One game, one drive even can shift, everything for a team. So how much has that kind of shifted the momentum around the team going into the next one?
Definitely a different energy around the building this week, obviously, getting a win, so you work so hard for it. And, the month of September just wasn't, our month. Ball didn't bounce our way. We lost a lot of close games. And, I was really proud of the guys last week. They battled, they found a way to get it done. And, I'm hoping that that's the spark the team needs to, finish strong.
After going into the season, picked second in the MEC, I think a lot of people were looking at this team as possibly a playoff type of team. Then you start 0-4. So, how did kind of the goals for this team shift through that start, and now as you're trying to get some wins here on the back half of the schedule?
Yeah, certainly disappointing. Obviously, came in with a lot of expectations. And, like I said, just lost a few close games early with the Wingate game in Fayetteville. Been battling some adversity, throughout those 4 games. And, now we're just trying to focus on playing the best football we possibly can. We can't get 4 games back, so we want to learn from the things we didn't do and try to improve there. And, just try to be a consistent group that plays hard and executes and makes plays and, does the football stuff that we need to do to win football games.
And then from that 0-4 start, went to Wheeling and trailed 21-7 at the half before playing a great second half to earn that win. So how much resilience did you see from your bunch in that game?
I mean, a lot, and I think that was what I was most proud of. Obviously, you're 0-4, you're on the road, you're down 21-7 at halftime, and, they had every opportunity if they wanted to just, chalk it and, kind of think, yeah, here we go again, we're going to lose another football game. But, I thought from the moment we got up there on Friday, the energy was good. I felt like the team had a little something that we hadn't had all year, and, the sideline was great, and those guys kept believing and, kept playing for each other. And, so I couldn't be prouder of them. And, as I told them, that's something that we can build off of here for the next 6 weeks.
Here on the Robesonian Sports Report on WAGR, I'm your host, Chris Stiles, sports editor at the Robesonian, and we're talking with UNCP head football coach Mark Hall. And, Coach, it's kind of been a revolving door at quarterback. From someone on the outside, they might be a little bit confused right now with 3 quarterbacks having taken snaps for you guys. So what can you tell us about what that's been like over the first few weeks?
Yeah, it's really something that, haven't really had to deal with, as a head coach. Colin Johnson came in. He was our starter. He's a senior, all-conference kid. We had huge expectations for him. And first play of the season, he ends up fracturing his foot. He played through that against Wingate, didn't play against Fayetteville, so we started Trey Robinson as a freshman. He got hurt during that game, and then we had the bye week. So Colin Johnson came back in week 3 against Charleston. At the time, we didn't know his foot was fractured, but he certainly wasn't 100%. Struggled, and, so then we go into the next week. We tried to start Caleb Pierce, a kid that transferred here last year for us. Very first play of the game, he breaks his collarbone. So it's just been an unfortunate situation. And then, last week we went back to Trey Robinson. Had some issues there. So, ultimately Colin Johnson came back in, and he's playing with a fractured foot. So it's just been one of those years where we can't stay healthy at the position. So it's created the inconsistency of who's playing, who's starting. But we're going to start Colin Johnson this week and, let him go in there. He played good last week, and we got to do a good job of trying to keep him upright as much as we can, eliminate some of the run game stuff he does just because, he's playing with a fractured foot.
And preparing, I should say, for West Liberty, and what are those preparations looking like this week?
And I feel like we've had a good week of practice, obviously coming off a win. Like I said, the energy is just a little different. Everybody wants to try to get their second win of the year, and then obviously just knowing that we're going to play at home. We're going to have to play well Saturday. I think West Liberty's well coached. They got some good athletes. They play hard. I don't think necessarily their record or their statistics are indicative of what we're seeing on film. So, I think we're going to have to, have a good day on Saturday to get a win.
Yeah, it's actually a good segue to my next question, which was they've allowed about 43 points a game, quite a bit of yards a game. But when we were talking yesterday, you said you don't really see that from them when you're watching film, that you see a much better defense than the picture that paints. So what will be the challenge of facing that defense Saturday?
I think our biggest challenge is just going to be we're going to have to do a good job on the line of scrimmage, and I think that's what I was kind of indicating when I said I just don't see it. I think their front is really good. They got a couple 3-4 year starters on the D-line, especially inside the D-tackle positions, and they got some kids at the edges with their defensive ends that got some some speed and athleticism. They can play with power. They got a couple returners at linebacker. So, I think their front seven, is veteran-laden. They play hard. They're fast and physical. So, like I said, I just haven't seen it on film. I see a group that plays hard and gets after it, and obviously they haven't, shut it down either with them being 1-4. So I think we're going to have to win the line of scrimmage for us to have success. We're going to have to be able to run the ball, and we're certainly going to have to be able to protect the quarterback.
And then on the offensive side, what have you seen from West Liberty on film as well?
Yeah, they're very creative. They're going to try to establish the run. They're going to try to establish the line of scrimmage as well. So we're going to have to do a good job there. And they've changed QBs as well throughout the year. And the kid they're playing now, they use them a lot more in the run game, a lot more QB stuff there, which creates challenges for the defense because it just gives an extra hat, that we got to account for. So I think the key to the whole game, both sides of the ball, is we got to win the line of scrimmage. We got to be able to run the ball, protect the QB, and then ultimately we got to be able to stop the run and get after their guy, for us to have success for 4 quarters.
UNCP coach Mark Hall, thanks for joining us here on the Robesonian Sports Report.
I appreciate you guys, and hope to see you guys on Saturday at the football game.
And we'll be right back. And back on the Robesonian Sports Report here on WAGR, and as we do in the last segment each week, looking at this week's upcoming high school football games as well as UNCP here in Robeson County. So before we do that, though, I do want to make a quick note that the NCHSAA the Board of Directors did vote yesterday to extend the fall season. It's a few days in some sports. It's a week in football and boys soccer, just on account of all the effects of Hurricane Helene in the western part of the state, and giving those schools out in that part of the state more time to make up some games and so forth. I don't think you're really going to see this affect Robeson County and the Sandhills at large any more than just they'll have a bye week before the playoffs, the teams that do advance. So, but did want to make note of that now after Week 11 there will be a Week 12 of high school football, and then in other sports as well there'll be a few days before the playoffs starts. So that will affect those teams in the playoffs. But I think a lot of teams might be glad to see the bye as a chance to, if they do in fact make it a bye week. There are some other options, but won't get too detailed here. But teams that do turn that into a bye week, good chance to get healthy going into the playoffs and make sure they're fresh for the first round game. So anyway, wanted to make note of that. But going into Week 8 of high school football, hard to believe we're that far into the fall, and finally getting some fall weather this week, it seems like. But St. Paul's is at Red Springs, Grace Creek is at Lumberton, Purnell Sweat is at Southview, and Midway is at Fairmont. Starting with the in-county matchup, the rivalry game between St. Paul's and Red Springs. That's a 7 p.m. kickoff in Red Springs. And Coach Setzer at St. Paul's being very clear about they're really trying not to see this as a rivalry game, trying to focus on it like it's any other game, but like it is an important game because it is a conference game, and they're all important when you're trying to win a conference championship, as St. Paul's is in position to try to do. And to Setzer's point about trying to make it not a rivalry, St. Paul's, in fact, has won 6 straight in the series, and most of those in blowouts. So from that position, they can say that as well. Mike Setzer, in fact, is 8-2 and has won 8 straight, dating back to his first stint back in the mid-2000s as St. Paul's head coach. 8-2 in the series, and St. Paul's overall leads the all-time series 40-31. Red Springs will look to stop a balanced St. Paul's offense that's done well with both the pass and the run pretty much throughout the season. And Coach Tim Ray from Red Springs noted that the biggest challenge for them will be a mobile quarterback, and Theophilus Setzer certainly is that. He's run for quite a few yards. I don't have an exact number right in front of me, but over the course of the season, a few hundred yards, frankly, over their first 6 games. Coach Mike Setzer pointing on the other side to T.J. Ellerby as the biggest weapon for St. Paul's to stop. the Red Springs wide receiver, who's caught 30 passes for nearly 600 yards and 6 touchdowns this season. St. Paul's defense is allowing 15 points per game this year, doing quite well for themselves, and they've shut out 2 of their last 3 opponents. So they'll be looking to, I don't know that they will shut out Red Springs necessarily, but looking to contain the Red Devils offense pretty well. And, always, we talk about in the national sports landscape, we talk about appointment TV games. This is kind of an appointment viewing game in the sense of in-person viewing in Robeson County sports anytime these 2 schools get together, especially on the football field. So moving on, Grace Creek's at Lumberton. It's homecoming for the Pirates. It's a 7:30 kickoff at Alton G. Brooks Stadium. Lumberton comes off 3 straight losses. Grace Creek beat Douglas Byrd 50-14 last week. Also beat Purnell Sweat a few weeks back and has lost to 71st in conference play. They're 2-1 in the league, 4-2 overall, the Bears are. It's a run-heavy Grace Creek team. 3 rushers have 495 yards or more on the season for them, led by Ezekiel Reed with 730 yards and 13 touchdowns. Those other 2 guys are Alfonso Myers and Daquan Anthony. They're all capable of breaking one at any moment. And the teams run for 1,908 yards on the season. That's 318 per game. So they definitely like to kind of ground and pound, if you will. Senior linebacker Caleb Caraway has 68 tackles for the Bears, and he's also the team's leading receiver on the other side of the ball. And Grace Creek coming in with, as I mentioned, the win over Douglas Byrd, and they're 4-2 on the season. They've built up some momentum. Lumberton, on the other hand, had those 3 wins to start, but has lost all 3 games since. Grace Creek leads the all-time series 3-0 these last 3 years that they've been conference foes. That includes a 49-34 win last year. Purnell Sweat is at Southview. It's a 7:30 kickoff in Hope Mills. Second straight Robeson County opponent for Southview, who beat Lumberton last week. Southview 2-1 in the league. Also has a win over Douglas Byrd and lost to 71st, and they're 4-2 overall. Last week, Rashad Dockery had 270 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground for the Tigers. Tariq Clarita, their quarterback, had a good game as well. He was 12 for 16 passing for 131 yards. And they've got a couple good linebackers that lead the way defensively in Gavin Williams and Bobby Souls. For Purnell Sweat, they enter having lost their last 3 with 7 total points in that span, and they've allowed 38 points or more in each game of that span as well. So the Rams are looking for a turnaround. They've fallen to 2-4 on the season at this point, 0-3 in the league. So they're looking for a turnaround pretty quickly to kind of redirect their fortunes this season and change the way that this story is being written so far. Purnell Sweat, or should I say Southview, leads the all-time series 12-2. Purnell Sweat last beat the Tigers back in 2006, and Southview earned a 27-7 win last year. That game was in Pembroke. Here on the Robesonian Sports Report on WAGR, I'm your host, Chris Stiles, going over this week's high school football action in Robeson County. Midway comes to Fairmont on Friday. That's a 7 p.m. kick at Howells Floyd Stadium. Fairmont continues to seek its first win. They've lost 7 straight games dating back to last season. Midway, meanwhile, is 5-1 overall and 1-0 in conference play under first-year head coach Barrett Sloan. They've won 4 straight games, including their conference opener last week, a 45-28 win over Clinton. Giamaya Blue has rushed for over 500 yards and 6 touchdowns for them, while Tanner Williams has thrown for almost 500 and 6 touchdowns. Kamari McNeil, a veteran receiver for them, with 181 yards receiving and 3 touchdowns. And then defensive lineman Wyatt Scott's been very strong for the Raiders as well, with 58 tackles this season. This is a Midway team that is potentially the biggest threat to a St. Paul's conference title. Down the road, they'll face each other. I believe it's the last week or the next to last week of the season. But it's Fairmont's concern this week. Midway is. And Midway is 3-0 in the series all time. Those matchups have occurred in the last 3 years since they've been conference opponents. Each of those wins by 26 points or more, including last year's 50-22 win up in Newton Grove. And collegiately, UNCP, we just talked to Coach Mark Hall, and the Braves will be at home against West Liberty on Saturday. It's a 1 p.m. kick at Grace P. Johnson Stadium. After 4 straight road games, and their bye week was in there, so they have not been home since August 31st. Just kind of a strange schedule but they'll be home for 4 of their last 6 games here down the stretch. Both teams, the Braves and the Hilltoppers, coming off of their first win of the season last week. West Liberty got a 31-10 win over Concord after it had lost its first 4 games by 20 points or more each week. West Liberty allowing 42.8 points per game, nearly 400 yards per game of offense. But as Coach Hall said, he sees it differently. He sees some very good things from West Liberty's defense and some things that the Braves are going to have to play well to have success against, particularly their defensive front. The Hilltoppers have had some moderate success offensively, even as they're 1-4 on the year. Hunter Patterson has rushed for 323 yards through 5 games. That's 4 touchdowns. They, like the Braves, have played multiple quarterbacks, but Trevor Lagarde has nearly 2/3 of the passing attempts, and he's thrown for over 550 yards and 3 touchdowns. Ben Turner's having a good season at receiver for the Hilltoppers with 385 yards and 2 touchdowns receiving. UNCP leads the all-time series 4-1. This includes wins the last 3 years that they've been conference foes. They also played a couple times back about 15 years ago. And last year, the Braves got a 37-19 win up at West Liberty. 2 years ago, they had a 24-3 win here in Pembroke, which was kind of notable because they had allowed 70 the week before to Charleston, the Braves had, and then came back home and played West Liberty and held them to 3 points. So that was quite a week-to-week turnaround a couple of years ago. The Braves' defense, of course, largely not the same personnel at this point as it was under a different coaching staff 2 years ago, but nonetheless, they'll look to kind of channel that success once again on the defensive end as they play West Liberty at home again this week. And you can read about all this at Robesonian.com and in the print edition of the Robesonian. Preview of the high school games, UNCP previews forthcoming, as is a picks column for the high school games as well. That'll be published later today. And, of course, coverage on Friday night. Other fall sports also in season. I've had some volleyball coverage this week, including Purnell Sweat and Lumberton taking on each other tonight in the regular season finale at Lumberton. So plenty going on in the Robesonian Sports Department. And, as I say, you can read it all at Robesonian.com and in the print edition of the paper as well. For Paul Matthews behind the scenes here at WAGR, I'm Chris Stiles. Thanks to Coach Mark Hall for joining us, and thanks to you for joining us as well. We'll see you next week here on the Robesonian Sports Report on WAGR.